All right, let's jump in. Welcome everyone to the this next installment of the Getting Started webinar series. I'm Chris Wong, Senior Developer Evangelist here at Mapbox. My guest today is myself, so I'll be the one presenting, and we're going to cover the Mapbox Tiling Service. So you're probably already familiar with Mapbox if you're here, and I encourage you to go check out our full suite of products, because a lot of times people get started with one product, they may not know about the entire ecosystem. But we do a lot more than just map rendering. We have a full, robust search API. We have, out-of-the-box navigation and point-to-point, turn-by-turn directions for mobile in our mobile SDKs. And we also have some robust data products. So go ahead and check out our full offering. Also want to invite you to join our developer Discord server. So I run developer relations here at Mapbox, and we started this Discord server last fall. It's now got over 1,700 users in it, and like sub-channels for every popular sector of Mapbox. So you'll find an iOS channel, you'll find a web channel, you'll find people working with different frameworks. So go ahead and check that out, and look forward to seeing you on there. Whoops, I clicked on the link. Okay, here we go. And here, let's continue with this presentation. Yep. So this is about me. In the past, I've been a civic hacker. I actually teach web mapping. I'm a former solutions architect and outreach engineer, all around just tinkerer, and I love cities. Today we're going to cover Mapbox Tiling Service, which is a beta service that was built in order to streamline the automation of vector tile creation for maps. So we're going to talk about what vector tiles are in a moment here, if you're not familiar. But today we're going to write a node script to convert a raw CSV of spatial data with points into geojson-ld, which stands for geojson line delimited. We're going to create a tileset source, which is the first step in order to create a new tileset, which is basically getting our data onto Mapbox's servers so that we can cut it into tiles. Then we're going to create an MTS recipe. That's basically a config file. It's a JSON file that actually will, tell MTS how to process the source data. We're going to create and publish the new tileset. So once that's done, then it's actually ready to be used, and then we'll show how to actually use it. So we're going to Mapbox Studio. We're going to bring in that tile set. We're going to style it a little bit. And then at the end, I'll do a very, very quick, actually using that in a Mapbox GL JS project. So we'll just copy some example code and get it working very quickly. So before we jump in, if you're not familiar with the concept of vector tiles, it's a pretty important concept when you're building with Mapbox. Basically, you may be familiar with GeoJSON data, but vector tiles, GeoJSON will get you only so far if you're actually loading that in the client. Once you have much larger data sets or data sets that are updated more frequently, you may want to actually use vector tiles. And that basically is a technique to take a large amount of vector data, as you can see in this image, cut it up into finite squares, and these squares correspond to different parts of the earth, and they, there's a different kind of set of them for every zoom level on the map. So as you zoom in closer, there'll be a lot more tiles. As you zoom out, there'll be fewer. But basically, MTS exists in order to streamline the process of taking raw vector data and cutting it into these tiles so that it is consumable in Mapbox's rendering libraries, so Mapbox GL JS or the mobile SDKs. So a quick overview of basically how Mapbox Tiling Service works. On the left here, we have tileset source, which is GeoJSON line delimited. It's very similar to regular GeoJSON, but it's just a slightly different format of how it's stored, and I'll show you how that works in a moment here. Then there's a recipe, so that's basically the configuration, and then those two things come together in order to create the vector tile set. So we have, we upload our data, we upload a config file that tells how to assemble that data, and then when we execute or basically publish the data set, it'll combine the two, or follows the recipe, takes the source data, and cuts it into a vector tile set. That can take a few minutes if it's like, for example, I'm going to use an example that has about 100 megabytes or 144 megabytes today, and it takes maybe a couple minutes to process that. May take longer if you have much larger data. But basically, once the tile set exists, it is a bona fide vector tile set. It'll actually show up in your Mapbox Studio account the same way it would if you were manually creating it by using the graphical interface. But all of this is automatable because it's done with the command line and the APIs. Once the vector tile set exists, we can actually consume it in Mapbox Studio or Mapbox GL JS directly, or we can use the mobile SDKs. So once this kind of blue box represented in the middle here exists, it can be consumed in multiple places. And then just sort of another image that shows the flow here. Mapbox Tiles Service doesn't really care where your data comes from as long as it is a geojson-ld file on the way in, right? So for today's exercise, I'm going to download a CSV file from an open data portal, and then that CSV will have latitude and longitude point coordinates in it. I'm going to transform that into geojson-ld, and that basically requires a custom script. So that part has nothing to do with MTS, but the output of that is then something I can put into MTS, where I'll create a tile source, I'll write a recipe, and then we'll create the tile set and publish it. So without further ado, I'll jump in. If you haven't seen it already, this is the documentation for the Mapbox Tiling Service. Again, it's in public beta, so we'd love for you to check it out and let us know what what your questions are, and give it a try and see if it meets your needs. Somebody messaged drop a link in the chat, so I'll try and do that. I have a small screen here, so I'm trying to keep my eye on the chat. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them. I will definitely give a lot more attention towards the end. If I can't give you attention immediately, just kind of hang tight, and I'll definitely do it at the end. Okay, so like I said, let's see. I've got a data set here, so I'll show you where that data set is coming from. So let me click on this link real quick. So I live in New York City. We have an open data portal, and this data set is the open restaurant inspections data. And you'll notice that it is, it's a tabular data set, but inside this table, you will see, I don't know if I can actually see it because parts of my screen are covered up. Yeah, there's a latitude and longitude column. So that's enough for us to make point data out of, and we can actually render that on a map. You'll see actually a lot of these actually don't have the latitude and longitude. So part of my process is going to be to filter this. So I've got a little project here set up, and basically we'll start with a curl to download this data set. Actually, I think I already downloaded it. So just to prove to you that it works, let's open a terminal and let's download. So you'll see it takes a few seconds, but it's actually just writing the same file. I already have it here because I was practicing with it a little bit earlier. It was about 13 megabytes. And if I click on it, you'll see, it's a CSV file, so it doesn't display well in my code editor here. We can open it and take a look, but you'll see that there's, the borough, the restaurant name, seating choice. So these are all restaurant inspections for the open restaurants here in New York. But a great way to explore this data would be to actually throw it all on a map, and we can kind of see what the inspection statuses were, or what kind of, or at least just know where all the open restaurants are. So that's probably all we'll tinker with today. So like I said in my earlier slide, the first step is to convert this into something called geojson-ld. If you're not familiar with GeoJSON, I recommend going to geojson.io, and this is a tool that will let you basically draw features on the map, and it'll show you the GeoJSON data over here in the right sidebar. So for example, if I popped a marker on the map, some here in New Jersey, you can see here that the data exists. It shows you the actual GeoJSON data, and you'll see that there's a feature collection. Inside that feature collection is an array of features, and this is a pretty basic example here, but like this is the most usable format in most of Mapbox's services. So you'll notice here, if I make a second feature, the features array now has two separate features in it. And basically GeoJSon-ld is the exact same format here, except we're removing this wrapper for the feature collection and the property for features. So GeoJSon-ld is actually taking the features themselves, which would be what I've highlighted here, and eliminating the wrapper and just kind of putting one of these on each line, right? So we'll kind of reduce this object into one line, and then we'll just repeat. So essentially what I can do is, with the CSV that I've downloaded, I can iterate over each one of these lines in the CSV. I'm going to skip the first line, of course, because it's the headers, but I can take each line of the CSV, transform it into a GeoJSON feature, and then write it out to a file. So I have a little script that I wrote ahead of time that will do this, and we'll just run through it. So if I can say, let's see, let's make this a little bigger so you guys can see. We'll say node transform.js, and before I run it, let's take a quick look at transform.js. So this is a node script, and I'm using the CSV to JSON library in Node. So that basically will take the CSV and turn each row of it into an object. So that's a JavaScript object or JSON object, which is great, but I need it to be a feature, an actual GeoJSON feature. So I have to do a little bit more manipulation. So here I'm opening the file. So open the CSV. I take the data and I am basically creating a GeoJSON feature array by mapping each row of the data. So the data comes in as an array of objects. So I'm going to do data.map. In this step, I'm actually lowercasing all the keys because if you look in the source data, these keys, like the titles up here, like borough and restaurant name, these are all capital. And just for consistency, I want them to be lowercase. Let's go back to transform. Okay, then I'm filtering out the ones that don't have latitude and longitude. So basically, I don't need them because I can't display them on my map. So I just don't want them. So I'm going to filter them out. So I'm using array.filter in JavaScript for that. And then I'm going to do another map, and this is where I actually build out the feature collection or the feature. So here I have type feature geometry, and then I build out the geometry using the latitude and longitude, and then the properties is just kind of everything else from that row. And then for each one of these, I write out to file, and you'll see what happens here when I run it. So let's execute that. So I'm logging some stuff down here in the console, but you'll see over here this inspections.geojson-ld file was created. And if we look in it, you will see what looks like the kind of the preambles for each of these features is the same, but as we get over here, we'll see we have coordinates and then we have properties. So I can see the borough, I can see the restaurant name, I can see the seating choice. And seating choice basically, I think, is three different values. It's either sidewalk, roadway, or both. And that's a nice little sort of categorical description that we can style off of. So I'll do that later. So this is great. I have a geojson-ld file, and I'm ready to bring in data into Mapbox Tiling Service. Okay. I will post a link in the chat to this tutorial. So this is on the Mapbox docs, and effectively has all the steps we need. So it's got some good code snippets to do all the steps we have to do. And I'm loosely following this, but I'm using my own data. So I would check this out as well. There's also a shorter video that doesn't explain things quite as much, but it kind of runs through the process to show you how this all works. So first thing we need is an access token. All right. So if you've used Mapbox before, you probably used a public access token that you need to actually just render tiles. But we need a more advanced token, or a token with more permissions on it, because we actually have to interact with the tileset service or with Mapbox Tiling Service. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to my Mapbox account, and I will say create new token, and I will call this MTS write. MTS, I will call it MTS writing. So there's public scopes, and these are all checked by default. But now we need to go down here to the area where things are not all checked. We don't want to check everything because we don't want to give this full permissions on our account or anything like that. But you will see that there's tilesets list, tilesets read, and tilesets write. So these are 3 permissions that we need in order to interact with Mapbox Tiling Service programmatically. So let's say create token. And I need to type in a 2-factor authentication code. So give me just a moment. And let's do submit. Okay, so here's my token, which I'm going to copy, and then I will close that window. So I only get one chance at that, so I hope it copied properly. Let's go back to these instructions here. So basically saying we need to set an environment variable in our environment, so that basically the commands we're using to interact with MTS will just use this token behind the scenes. So we just need to set it once. So the command is, we're just going to say export Mapbox access token equals paste it in. Okay, and that's done. So I'll clear my browser so that, yeah, so that's now in place, and then my commands will not fail because of that. So the second thing we need to do is install the, where does it say it on here? Tileset CLI. So if you click on this, you'll see this is the GitHub repository for the Tileset CLI. It's a Python script, or it's a Python command, but I've already installed it. So I would go there and follow those instructions. But to give you an idea of what it does is I can actually type the command tilesets, and this is where we're going to actually kick off from. So everything we do here from here on out from the command line will be a tilesets command. So let's make this a little bigger so you can see it. But you can see we have the ability to, we can say tilesets create, and that'll create a new tileset. We can say tilesets delete. We can say upload source. So these are all the different things we can do. So you can interact with all the your tileset sources and your tilesets from this command line. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So moving on through this tutorial, the very first step is to create a tileset source. So this is where we actually upload the geojson-ld that we just created, and the command is right here. It just says tilesets upload source, then my username, then a name of the source, and then the path to the data that I want to upload. So let's just do that. Tilesets. I'm going to go back and check. Okay, so the command is upload source. Then I need my Mapbox username, which for me is Chris Wong Mapbox. And I think the Zoom is covering some of my screen, so I have to move some stuff around here so I can see what's going on. Let me just make this a little smaller for right now. Okay, so tilesets, upload source, Chris Wong Mapbox. Let's give it a name. I'm going to call this NYC Restaurant Inspections. And then I will point it to this inspections.geojson-ld. So that would be ./data/inspections.geojson-ld. Okay, so when I hit enter, what it's doing is actually going to upload this data, and then it'll be kind of staged in a place where I can continue with the process of defining a tile set from it. So let's give it a moment to do that. Somebody asked in the chat, will we have the recording of this? Yes, this will be on YouTube probably tomorrow. We have a full YouTube playlist of all of these getting started videos. So you can check out getting started for iOS. You can check out getting started with Mapbox GL JS. And also let us know which other ones we should make, because we'd love to continue this series. Okay, so we can see the upload is happening. Let's just give it a second. This is, I think, 100 megabytes or so, so it's not very big. Somebody says they're waiting for the link to the tutorial. I'll drop it again, which is right here. Actually, it's right above you. Oh, I'm only messaging. Okay, it looks like my messages are not going to everybody, so give me just a moment. Apologies. Okay, you should be able to see it now. I think my messages were going to only the other host, which is nobody. Okay, let's take a look here. Good. Okay, so we have a response here that says, so we have it's basically the JSON response from this upload a tileset source says there's an ID, and this is the ID. So it's really just the type of thing, because there's lots of other things that can exist in Mapbox. My username, and then this is the name we gave the tileset source, right? So NYC Restaurant Inspections. It gives us a file and a size. And that's the first step. So this now exists. The data is on Mapbox's servers, but we haven't yet said to do anything with it. So there's no tile set yet. There's nothing we can use that. It's just kind of data, data sitting there with a name, getting ready to be used. Okay. So the next step we want to do is write a recipe. So recipes are an MTS format, pretty simple, but this example kind of tells you all you need to know. It's a JSON object. We're just going to save it as a file. It's got a version, it's got layers. And if you're not familiar with vector tiles, you can actually have multiple layers of data inside one tile. So the browser may download one tile, but it could have several different discrete named layers in it. So you might have one layer for your streets and one layer for your points or something like that. So in this case, we're only going to do one, but you can see how this works, where there's a layers object, and then the properties inside of the layers object are actually the names of the layers. So in this one, it's called Hello World. So I'll just copy this little template for the recipe, and let's go back to my my file here. So I created this file called recipe.json. Actually, I don't need to paste this in, but first let's give our layer a name. So I'll call it NYC. Let's call it inspections points. So this is a convention. It's not necessary to say points, but just to specify that it's a points layer is actually just a good form thing. Then we need the source. So what's the source? The source is what I just got back from when I uploaded the tileset source using the command we just did. So if you look in my response down here, this is the actual source ID, and that's what we need to put in here. So we're saying, okay, this is a recipe for a tile set. In order to make this tile set, go get this source data and cut it into tiles for these zoom levels. So we can have a min zoom of 10 and a max zoom of 16. 10 will probably get us zoomed out enough to see all of New York City, and 16 will be close enough to see like a block. And then we can over zoom past that just fine, but this is where it will actually cut the tiles. You should be aware that, you know, the larger range you have and the higher zoom level you want to go to, the more tiles need to be cut, and that just uses more resources and takes more time. So you should actually, you know, consider how much detail you need and what zoom level you need to go to. And you can actually experiment with that and see, you know, what the different sizes are. But all of that will affect the time it takes to process and just how much data ends up getting stored at the end of this. Okay, so we have a recipe. Let me save that. So the next step is to actually use this recipe and define the a tile set. So I'm going to keep scrolling down here because this just gives us commands we can use here. So we're going to create the tile set. So the command is, again, tile sets, create. I'm going to say, and then we have to name the tile set. So we'll say this will be username dot hello world tiles, but we're going to call mine like Chris Wong Mapbox dot NYC restaurant inspections. We need to tell it which recipe to use to create the tile set. So I'm going to reference that recipe file I just made. And then we also need to give it a name. Okay, so that's the name of the overall tile set. Actually, sorry, this is the ID right here. And this is the more friendly name. So the ID needs, you know, should not have any spaces in it, but name is what will actually show up in the UI in Studio and should be something more human friendly. So let's do that. I'm going to basically reproduce this command. So let's say tile sets create is the command. Username Chris Wong Mapbox dot. And then the rest of it, we'll see NYC restaurant inspections will be the ID of my tile set. Then I need to pass in these two flags. So recipe, I say recipe, and then I say ./recipe.json. And then I need to say name, which is like I said before, the human friendly name. So we'll just kind of call this NYC with capitals, restaurant inspections. Okay, so if we hit enter on this, it's firing off that recipe to Mapbox's servers, along with the rest of the name and all the other stuff we configured here, and a tile set should exist after this. So let's hit enter. And you'll see in the message here, it says successfully created empty tile set. And then it tells you need to publish your tile set to begin processing your data. So it actually hasn't cut the vector tiles yet, but it has sort of created a placeholder. And we can prove that that is true by going to my Mapbox account. And let's go back to account.mapbox.com for me. And if I click on Studio, so I could have just gone to studio.mapbox.com. You know, styles are where you actually design the map and can pick colors and shadows and everything like that. Tile sets is where our data comes from. And if I click on tile sets, you'll now see NYC restaurant inspections modified 1 minute ago. So this is to kind of sanity check that our command line commands are working, and that, you know, this does exist So there's no graphical interface for the tileset sources. So all that stuff you have to sort of interact with via the command line. Once the tileset exists, then you can actually come in here into the GUI and inspect it. So if I clicked on this now, there's nothing in it because it's empty. It won't be populated with data until we actually run the commands to run the recipe and populate and turn that source data into vector tiles in this tile set. So this is kind of like a placeholder. Okay, so let's get on with it. So next step, publish your new tile set. So the command is tilesets publish username.tileset ID. So simple enough. Let's just say tilesets publish, if I can spell it right, Chris Wong Mapbox dot, and what did I call it? I called it, yeah, NYC-restaurant inspections. Wonderful. Okay, let's hit enter on that. All right, so it doesn't happen instantaneously, but there is a job that's now running on a server somewhere. And you can see in the JSON response that we got back here, it says processing and the name of my tile set, and it gives me a job ID. And then it actually gives us a very helpful link here that says, here's the command you can, or here's the URL you can go to get a JSON response back to figure out what is the status. All right, so if I paste this link in, whoops, that's not what I meant to do. Sorry. You can go, this link will take us to Studio, but it actually says run tilesets job. So it gives us the job ID, and then we can get that back. So let's clear the console here. So if we take that this command that it advised us to run, it'll give us some JSON back. Actually, let's pipe that to JQ so it's pretty and we can read it. And look, there we are. So it says this ID is still processing. So when I tried this, earlier when I was testing, it took about a minute or 90 seconds or so to run this. So I'm going to keep polling it every few seconds here, and we'll see if we can get this back. So still processing. Still processing. Talk amongst yourselves. Let's go back to the UI and see what that shows up as. Let's see. Let's go to. Yeah, I'm still not seeing. This is still showing up kind of blank here, so it probably doesn't have any data in it yet. So let's see what happens. Okay, still processing. Still processing. Okay, let's try again. Ooh, okay, different response this time. Let me clear that and I'll run it again. And we'll go back to the top. Okay, so now stage success. Good. So I'm sure there's lots of things we might be able to get wrong that will result in not getting a success back. It also says a bunch of features were dropped to enforce tile size limits. So there's probably a lot more information here we can go through, but for the most part, it was successful. So let's take a look now. And NYC Restaurant Inspections has data in it as indicated by this little orange bar. And we can actually click on it and take a look at it. Wonderful. Okay, so our raw data was uploaded. We uploaded a recipe, and then we told MTS to publish that data set. And effectively, we're in place now. This data is ready to be consumed. What's great about this is that the recipe already exists, and all we need to do to update this is actually replace data in the tileset source, right? So we can run the entire first step of this process where we if this data changes next week, which it actually will, we can run that same, we can curl it and run that little node script to transform it into geojson-ld, and then upload a new version of the tileset source, and then republish this tileset. So all that can be completely automated with whatever you can set it up to run the scripts, and we're in good shape. So this is our tile set. So you saw it, this happened live right in front of you, but we took it directly from NYC Open Data, we transformed it, and we brought it through MTS, and now it's here ready to use. So the rest of this demonstration, I'm going to now use this. So we'll go to Mapbox Studio and actually try and make a style for it. So that was the UI for just inspecting the tile set, but we want to go to styles now. So we're going to hit new style. So I'm going to make I'm going to use the dark theme. So this is one of our core styles and great for showing, data visualization, especially for a large point data set like this. So I'm going to say customize monochrome. First thing I like to do in Studio is give things names because it'll just call it monochrome and that's not helpful. So we'll just call it NYC restaurant inspections. So remember, we're making a style here, but this is like, already got all the sort of base map things that I need. So we've got like labels, we've got, line street names, we've got points of interest, we've got parks and pathways and buildings and things like that. But let's click on layers. And if we click the little plus sign, I can say, okay, now I want to add a new layer. The first thing I need to do when I add a new layer is say, where is the source? And if I click on source, I should be able to choose my new tile set. So I just created this tile set using MTS. And let's see if we can find it. NYC restaurant inspections. So this is my new tile set that I just created with you guys. And again, inside each tile set, there are multiple layers, we call them, of source data. And ours only has one called inspections-points, if you recall. So I just need to specify that. Okay, so this is type circle. Let's click back onto style, and you can see these little black circles have shown up because that's like the default color. Not very good on this dark map, of course. So let's just quickly change the color to, well, maybe not red. Look, blue or some kind of teal, and check out my data. This is great. So I can click on these and let's see. Inspections-points will show up and it'll tell me all I need to know about them. So, in Studio, you can do a whole lot to impact your styling. So for a simple exercise here, I'm actually gonna let's do some dependent styling. So we'll say style with data conditions on the color. So I'm just basically going to color code these based on the, which one was it? So let's look, these are all the fields that were in my source data. So let's do seating choice. So let's click seating choice, and then it will say, what values do you want? So I just remember from the data set, there's only 3 values in seating choice. It's either sidewalk, roadway, or both. So let's do sidewalk. I'll say use sidewalk. So it's basically saying, if the string is sidewalk, what color do you want the item to be? And for sidewalk, we will say green. And let's hit done on that. And then we can add another condition. And we'll say for seating choice, let's do roadway. And we'll use roadway. And let's make roadway be this kind of like yellow. And then there's one for both. So let's add that really quickly. Both. Use both. And what color should both be? How about this kind of pink? Okay, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time making this beautiful, but you get the idea here. So then we have a fallback value of blue, and if we see any blue on this map, it should only be because it didn't have one of those 3 values in the data, and I'm not seeing any at a quick view. So I'm actually worried that my green and my yellow are too close to each other. So let's change this green to something a little more blue. How about that? Okay, still not the prettiest map I've ever made, but you get the idea. So we have 3 different color types here. We could also do like, we could, I think there's like a seating, like a number of seats thing in here. So we could actually make the circles bigger or smaller based on that if we wanted to. But this is not about Mapbox Studio right now. So what we can do then is publish this map or publish this style. So let's do that. We'll hit OK. And this is ready to use. So if I hit the share button, I have this Mapbox style URL that I can just use in Mapbox GL JS or in the Maps SDKs. All right, so that's the full process. But just to drive the point home, let's actually just set up a quick web map. So I'm going to search for Mapbox example display a map. So just to show how simple it is, if you haven't used Mapbox GL JS, we can actually use this example code. This is just a full HTML file for a simple map that you see here. And I'll just modify it really quickly and use the style that I just created. So we used MTS to generate a tile set. We used the tile set to generate or to make a custom style in Mapbox Studio. And now I want to use that style in a mapping project. So let's go to my terminal here. Let's say mkdir, let's go mkdir simple map demo, cd simple map demo. And I'm just going to paste in, let's make an index.html file, paste in this code, and let's do format document to make it a little prettier. Okay, so this is, this is just the code from the example. And where it says style, this is telling it to use the Mapbox street style. I don't want it to use the street style. I want it to use the style that I just published from Studio, which is this style URL. And if I paste this in here, and I hit go live using my live server, and of course it's not zoomed in on New York, it's zoomed in somewhere else. Yeah, so once I zoom in New York, so remember we had a minimum zoom on these tiles. So once I get in closer, you'll start to see them appear. And this is my map. So obviously not a full-on application, but now I could come in here and start adding a sidebar. I could add some tooltips and some pop-ups. And yeah, so that's it. Actually, maybe I want to go one step further because we have plenty of time. So I tried this a little earlier, but it worked pretty well. So let's go find another Mapbox example for pop-ups, and we'll say Mapbox display pop-up hover. Yeah, so we have a great example here for displaying a pop-up on hover, and works great with point data that's circles, which is exactly what I have. So I don't need most of this data, I don't need most of this code, but I can just copy these bits right here, which are how the pop-up gets made. And let's paste that into my script down here. So right after I instantiate the map, paste in this code. Let's format the document a little bit. And the only things I need to change here, so we have a mouse enter event and a mouse leave event, and we're calling the layer by name. So the layer name is important here. So this places layer exists in the example I copied from, but doesn't exist in my data. Let's go back to Studio and make sure we get the layer name right. So my layers, I have this inspections-points layer. So that's what it needs to be called. So let's change this to inspections-points. And then the only other thing I need to do, basically the contents of this pop-up are going to be what's in this description variable. And there's no description property on this data, but there is restaurant name. Can I spell it right? Restaurant name. And let's see if that works. So let's go back to my map, which I need to change the default center point, of course. But look, if I hover, I can pull out the restaurant name. So all this is coming from my tile set, which is being consumed in Mapbox GL JS. And then now that code that I used is using query rendered features to pull out just the restaurant name and show it in a pop-up. So I think that'll complete the demo. I want to show just as a reminder again, sort of how all this worked and a kind of recap. So we created a tile set source from our geojson-ld, line delimited GeoJSON. That was created from a CSV and then uploaded to Mapbox servers using the tileset CLI. Then we wrote a config file, which we call a recipe, and then processed that recipe plus the source into a tile set. And then we used that tile set in Mapbox Studio to create a style. And then we went to Mapbox GL JS to consume that style and add some interactivity. So that's kind of the full suite. And if you want to see this graphic again, this is kind of starting from the raw CSV and going all the way to publishing a tile set. So I think I saw a couple questions, so let me address those. And if you have any more, go ahead and ask them right now. But that'll conclude the demonstration today. Okay, so someone says how to change the preset zoom extent in Mapbox Studio. For example, for buildings, how to make it 10 instead of 15. So yeah, I mean, there's control, like for, assume you're talking about for a layer, and you can actually change the dimensions at which any layer is visible, and you can also make it like fade out when you go between two different layers. So that's beyond the scope of this this demo, so I'm not going to go into answering it. But if you want to jump into the Discord and ask that question again, I can show you some documentation to get that taken care of pretty easily in Studio. All right, I see some other questions. Again, these are Studio and not necessarily related to MTS, so I will defer those into or kind of push those into the Discord if you want to. Okay, so it's great if we can get some code after this, after set this config. I mean, get the correct setting on layer expression and can be used on GS library. Okay, I'm not exactly sure what you're asking there, Carlos. So again, go back into Discord and I'd be happy to chat with you there. So I think that'll take us to the end of this. So let me full screen this and I'll send us off and say, thank you so much for joining us for getting started with Mapbox Tiling Service. And again, I'm in the Discord pretty much all day, every day, as long as I'm working. So you can find me in there and follow up with any questions if you want to know more about Mapbox Tiling Service. But I hope this is enough to get you started scripting and automating your data uploads to Mapbox. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you at the next one.